Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mary Poppins of Business live show. I'm Nelly Makangu, your host of today from Athena Leaders, and I'm really excited to be interviewing Rachel Cossar from Virtual Sapiens. From a ballet dancer to a startup tech founder, and along the way, there are many interesting achievements that Rachel has done so far. Her journey, even before reaching the tech world, is very interesting. And I'm really excited about diving deep today. So what are we going to be looking at? Really, today is really about, Rachel and her journey to Virtual Sapiens. If for anyone out there wondering how I can improve my communication style, especially now that we are spending so much time on Zoom, well, Virtual Sapiens have the answer. If you are new on the show, a few reminders before we kick off our great conversation. We love getting questions. So if you have any questions, please put them on just write them down wherever you are on the platform, and we will be able to see and interact with you. And if you are watching a replay and have more questions, then please use #AthenaLeaders and we'll get back to you. The second important thing, well, we always love speaking to startups and organizations such as Virtual Sapiens. So if you know anyone out there who would like to tell their story, please get them to connect with me, and I'll be happy to answer as well. Lastly, and more importantly, please relax, have fun, and enjoy the show. So Rachel, could you please tell us a little bit about you and Virtual Sapiens as well, just to kind of warm everybody up?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this all week. And just a quick little bit about myself. So my journey through to becoming a tech startup CEO is a little bit unique in the sense that my profession was as a ballet dancer. I danced professionally with Boston Ballet for 10 years. And before that, I was a rhythmic gymnast on the Canadian national team. So my whole life has very much been physically oriented, very high level performance. And when I retired and moved into the world of your typical 9-to-5 office job, what I realized very quickly, and which has since led to where I am today running Virtual Sapiens, is that we actually have a lot of room to express, to communicate, and to tie what we want to send as a message with the way that we actually show up and communicate physically.
Yes, and then I guess you started Virtual Sapiens. Can you tell us a little bit more as well about what does, for anyone who's never come across it, what is Virtual Sapiens and how can it help you improve your communication skills?
Absolutely. So Virtual Sapiens is a machine learning based communication coach. So we are using my expertise and knowledge as a communication facilitator and coach paired with our amazing capacity and capabilities these days with machine learning and artificial intelligence to provide everyone with their own communication coach who sits with you on calls, gives you feedback and encouragement during live events or as a practice round before that upcoming important meeting or presentation you have.
That's quite exciting. And especially right now when we start talking, like I said before, there's so much that we are doing now that is virtual. And it's actually very interesting to me, especially if you look at my background. I used to be extremely introverted and I hated public speaking. And I wish that back then you could have an application somewhere in your house without having to go outside and to be able to see how, to connect with people online. And I guess one of the questions I have for you when it comes to Virtual Sapiens, how did you find out, the idea, right? Because that's another thing that a lot of people out there are thinking about. Okay, I want to create something, but I'm not sure. So how did you really spot that gap in the market and thought, I'm really going for this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, the evolution was pretty smooth in the sense that I had been in the field coaching and training professionals since 2017. So I had been running workshops, doing one-on-one coaching, all within this world of communication training in person, right? And then when the pandemic hit and everyone went online and we activated this I mean, video had been actually increasing as a means of communication before the pandemic, but we really accelerated it as a core channel of communication. And with that, yes, there are challenges, but there are also amazing opportunities. And I was just seeing a lot of the opportunity to leverage video-based events in order to open up access to this training that I before could only really do with a few people at a time.
Yeah, wow. This is quite interesting. And I guess one of the other things that's happening at the moment is the great resignation. I'm not sure if you heard about that. Of course, because of COVID, in addition to obviously communicating online, a lot of people have been reflecting on their careers, and some have decided to change and move to other areas as well. And in fact, what I love about your story, as you shared with us just earlier on, is the way you've moved from different careers, from the dancing and performing routes to you've done some coaching and to now having a tech startup. What kind of advice can you tell to people entering a completely new profession that you can, advice that can help them so that they can feel more comfortable about just going for it? Because I think that you're a great example of someone who just embraced, following their dreams and their goals as well.
Yes, so I love this question. I actually have I did a TEDx talk on the subject of reinvention and transition. So what I think can sometimes be forgotten when you are transitioning, and it can be from something that's pretty related in terms of what you're doing to something that's completely different. I think what can often be forgotten, but is one of the most important things to remember, is that where you are now and where you are going is built on the shoulders of your past skills, your past experience, your past identity, and that you're not starting from zero, right? And so as you look to this new role or this new opportunity, there's always skills in your toolkit that you can leverage. Even if it's different, right? And that could be in the way that you show up, the way that you work through problems, the way that you solve problems, right? There are things that everyone's experienced in their past that are unique to you, right? Like it's almost like reframing it from, oh, change is so scary and it's going to be so uncomfortable, to this is such an opportunity to bring my specific, unique perspective potentially to an entirely new world.
Yeah, well, that's very true. And I love the way you framed it. It's not about being scared, and it's really about, again, looking at everything that you've got, right? Your skills are not just what you have today, but what makes you unique is the combination of everything that you've learned along the way. Now, more specifically for non-tech founders, because that's another area as well where there's a lot of people who might have great ideas of building something, but they a bit worried about not being the expert when it comes to technology, or not being able to speak the language with engineers. So how did you navigate that? Where were some of your challenges, especially when you first started building your company, your challenging regarding tech and being a non-tech founder?
Oh, yeah. It's like a totally different language. Ballerina trying to talk to a bunch of engineers is definitely interesting. But for me, I was very fortunate. So a good friend of mine who's actually one of our advisors now at Virtual Sapiens, I went to him first when I had this idea, and just kind of gut checked it with him. Like, is this possible? Am I crazy? Am I expecting like magic or too much? And he was like, no, this is definitely all possible, even with things that are pretty much out of the box in terms of the machine learning capacity. And he really stuck with me in the early days and helped me navigate some of those early conversations with engineers. Okay. And whether that was with hired contractor teams or eventually then, with my co-founder and our actual in-house engineering team. And learning every day, though, like every day, it's like, oh, like if you tell an engineer one thing, like they will take you so literally, so be very specific, which is a great practice for honestly anyone.
Yeah, I can relate to what you said, because obviously I'm an engineer myself. Right. I started as a software engineer, and whenever I work with teams, it's really, communication, as we're talking about, is even more crucial to make sure that you kind of get the message across. And again, like one thing I love about what you said as well is this idea of not being the expert in everything, but being comfortable learning as you go as well. Because I've seen that some non-tech startups do struggle with that, but equally, you do get tech startup that struggle with the other aspects of running a business, right? Because running a business is you have the sales, operations, you have to going in and find investors, which is kind of it's quite challenging. So when you the earlier years of your when you're starting your business, what did you find was the most difficult aspects to navigate?
I'm like, where to start? It's interesting when you're in this like beginning start phase, there's all this like energy, and it's kind of like things can't go fast enough because you see this opportunity and you're like, like we have to go now. And so I think just globally, one of the hardest things, and it continues to be a challenge today, even when we're so much farther along, is this push and pull between, like, you want to get this idea out there, you want to be engaging with people who could potentially be buyers, and yet you also have to like really give yourself the time and the space to build a product that is stable and works and can sustain the pressure of scale, right? And so more just from like an emotional perspective, that's hard. It's really managing expectations, it's being patient, it's managing timelines, and that's something that I don't think people talk about as much because everyone's very kind of preoccupied with, well, building your pipeline is really hard, or hiring those first engineers is really hard, and those things are hard, but they all kind of fall under that umbrella of product and going out to market and building that audience.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's it. That's the toughest balance when it comes to a startup. I mean, building any type of business, right? Just every single area in isolation is hard enough. So when you combine them and making sure that you have the right level of, going after the market with something that's great, and making sure that you don't hold back too long as well, can be a difficult ball to juggle. Earlier, you've mentioned like you do have a co-founder now, and one thing I picked up from what you said was that you kind of started on your own and then find your co-founder on the journey, or did you start it from the get-go with the co-founder?
No, I was very much a solo founder when I first started this, and I mean, honestly, it's it's really funny to show up to an investor meeting and be like, "Hi."
Just me.
I'm a ballerina and I want to do this thing, and people obviously respect my career as they should, but there's always like that, we definitely need to see a little bit more of a technical backbone here, which also now that I have that technical backbone, I'm like, wow, like very different. But I had to, it's really interesting, Nelly, because I went back and forth for a while on, as to like whether I needed a technical co-founder, or whether I could, engage a CTO, or whether I could continue, with the help of my advisor, whether I could continue to work with a like contracted team until we get some kind of traction. But in the end, I think it was, I started working full-time on Virtual Sapiens in January of 2021. And honestly, by April, by like March, like mid-March, I was like, no, what I really needed was a partner, like someone who would be thinking about this 24/7 with me, someone who I could text or call at any point and be like, hey, like, what do you think about this? And that's what I was really looking for. And of course, within the world of, okay, well, what kind of partner are you looking for? It's like, I definitely need the technical piece to be there. So that was a search I kicked off in, I had always been softly looking, but I really started looking in a lot more earnest in March.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's again is another question that I kind of had when I was preparing for this, looking at some of the issues that other startup face, and finding your co-founder was one of them. And thanks for sharing actually your thought process. And obviously, when you found your co-founder, or when you're evaluating other people to get to that point, it's one of the way I like to talk about having a co-founder is a bit like, getting married to someone because you're in there for the long haul. And for some people, especially if they didn't have some kind of relationship prior to, or working relationship even prior to getting married to their co-founders, the idea of having a baby together can be a bit, daunting. What if although we share the same vision now, what happened in the future? But are we still going to share the same passion? So how did you navigate this unknown or the pressure of kind of agreeing and signing the dots with one person of your current co-founder? I think it's Neil is called.
Yes, Neil.
Neil, yes. So how did you kind of get to that point and thought, yes, he's the one. This is why I'm actually going for it.
Yes. So interestingly, this was when I put out all of my job descriptions and calls to action or whatnot on various websites. Neil was the one who reached out to me first, had been thinking about ways to support a remote population of workers and saw what I was doing and was curious. So he initiated the conversation, and we ended up going back and forth in a quasi due diligence process for probably 2.5 to 3 months. And then once we did decide to go for it, we continued to work together for another 3 months before things really became official, right? So there was basically like a half-year period where really at any point, either one of us could have been like, this is not working. But what I will say is that at that 3-month mark, before making the initial commitment to like, let's go for this, very publicly, right? I put together a document of questions that were inspired by this article that I'd been shared. I think it was called like 50 dating questions for your co-founder, which sounds like something from Cosmo.
Going back to marriage there.
But I took that document and I kind of distilled it down to maybe 20 or so questions that were really about like digging deep, like how do you work, how do you face challenge, like what makes you most scared about this, right? Because if you're not scared about this, then I don't know if you're really thinking about it the right way, because you should probably be very scared. But then also in being scared, what's making you move forward anyways, right? And so just a whole bunch of, I'm happy to share that list of questions with any founder who's looking for a co-founder. For us, it was really helpful to go through that process and just very honestly be like, this is who I am, this is how I work, this is how I want to work, and this is the company I want to build, right? Because if one person's like, I want to build a unicorn and I want to IPO, and the other person's like, I want to build a sustainable $1 million business, those are very different things, right? Like you want to make sure you're on the same page with some of those questions.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, it's actually, again, I love your thought process in this, and definitely be interesting to see your 50 questions. And I guess last week, I think I was at a networking event, and there was this guy was talking about pretty much what you said about different expectations of where to take the company. He's a co-founder that came later and is working with his sister, which again brings a bit more of a family tension in there. And the issue was that one of them wanting to grow the company and get bigger, and the other one was looking at it from the perspective of, we are making just enough money for us to survive and to live, and I don't want the company to be bigger. Whereas the other person's vision was that the product line was, they actually have a strong product line, and he really wanted to push for that. So yes, I agree with the way you work this through, and really being clear that both co-founders are going down the same vision as well.
Yeah.
So if we go back a bit more to kind of look at the virtual Sapiens again, because another thing that I really want you to talk us through is really the body language and the communication science, because again, you do have a psychology background, or kind of studying that world as well. So it'll be good to share with us how you translated that aspects and into a software?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't have a classical, I don't have a degree in psychology. My degree is in political science, but I'm very well versed in the world of nonverbal communication in particular, and some neuroscience principles that sprinkle in to that as well. For me, it was really like there was a moment when, having left the world of ballet, where everything physical is front and center, and my first job was at Harvard in fundraising, and I walked into the office and just very quickly realized that people weren't really bringing their full selves to the table, that the way that you hold your body and you hold yourself has an impact on the way you feel, that people were not showing up in a way that was conducive to energized, engaging conversations and relationship building. And these were all things that I was doing without thinking about it, and people would notice. And so it was kind of like that observation of dynamics that led me to found my first company, which was called Choreography for Business. And that was the company that I led workshops and training sessions and programs under for the better part of 4 years. And again, it was this question that I'd had for a while of, this feels a little inefficient, right? I want to be able, everyone needs a good dose of awareness. Everyone needs just the baseline feedback in order to help them be the best communicator they can be. And that's really hard to do without technology, right? And I think before the pandemic, it was a very hard invitation to extend to people to, okay, well, why don't you record yourself on video and then I'll look at it, or we'll build an app around that, because people weren't using video that much, right? Whereas now everyone's on video. So it's now we have that access key that we were missing. And the other thing that I found early on in the pandemic was no one's really been taught how to show up on video in a way that feels human and comfortable and confident, right? There's this whole new relationship that you have to understand between yourself and your lens, basically, right? Your portal that's connecting you to the rest of the world. And until you develop that awareness and these specific skills, a lot of these critical moments of connection are lost.
Yeah. And I guess especially right now I think one thing as well, when we talk about leadership and soft skills, communication is one of the things that some people might not really get any kind of training. That's even before the pandemic. Yeah. And I guess, I don't know if you've noticed that as well, again, from my own field as a software engineer, most of the time my training and even university is really based on the hard, really important skills, obviously, to become an engineer.
Right.
Yet once you start working, most of the training is still focused towards the technical one, and the soft skills do kick in. If you're lucky, when you get a promotion into a leadership role, and especially when it comes to coaching, that's usually only for high-level executives. It's very rare to see, unless there's a performance plan or something like that. It's very rare to see managers even getting coaching on communication. Yet communication is really important in terms of influencing people, team members, proposal. And if you're a startup founder and you're thinking, how can I improve my communication skills? Then, try out Virtual Sapiens, because you're probably going to be meeting your investors online or be talking to them online. So it's great to kind of pick up on some of those basics of communication as well.
Yeah. And I think, when you think about, especially for startup founders, when you think about you're in that pitch setting and so many of these pitches are happening on video, or you're interviewing, and a lot of the interviews will continue to be virtually initially, the level of competition is so high, and what you're bringing to the table is often very at a similar level as what other people are bringing to the table. It's, your content is pretty polished. You've spent hours going over your content, and yet the delivery is I'll just wing it. And the difference between someone who shows up, practiced and rehearsed, clean and crisp, articulate and confident versus someone who's kind of just winging it through their content or their presentation. It's in those last moments of like who is really going to come out on top, and it's like, why would you leave that like very real component on the table?
Yes, definitely. And in fact, when we talk about nonverbal communication, and even communication in general, one of the things that people forget is it's not just what you say. It's also how you say it, your mannerism and everything. That reminds me of South Summit. I was at a conference in Madrid. I think it was a few weeks ago now. And it was about, there was a lot of pitch fest for startups in different categories, startups around the world. The winner was actually, they strike me as different because I was watching I was watching pitches and everything. And one of the things, again, it was very simple what they did. They all wore the same outfits, trousers and or skirts as well, all blue, the color of the brands. And the way they even sat, the entire team, although the founder was pitching, the way this team kind of moved from the back to the front, and they felt unified, right? Yeah. And of course, when you're looking at other people pitching, because it's a long day, there's like 10 or 15 people, one after the other, coming up with ideas. Sometimes you do remember something non-verbal that stands out. Of course, it's not why you will invest. But at the end of the day, if you do want to give that little bit of extra that people will remember you for, then non-verbal communication is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of times it's the delivery of something and the way that you show up physically, what you do with your hands, what you do with your eyes, that elicits more of that emotional connection with your audience, right? And that's like, you want to make someone feel something, right? You do want to stand out. Yeah,
definitely. And I guess one of the things that we were talking about, obviously, before this was launching a new product and the issues that come with that.
Oh, yes.
I believe you just launched a Sidekick product. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that? And we will also have a kind of a very short demo. They can see the full thing on YouTube. I just want to get a flavor on that as well. So if you want to introduce us on what the Sidekick product is, and then we will show the short clip about Sidekick.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Sidekick is our first scalable product that we're launching. Right now we're in private beta, but we are accepting new signups. The Sidekick basic is a very seamless integration into your Chrome extension. It's a Chrome extension, and it's like your own virtual communication coach. So if you were to have the luxury of having a sidekick or a coach like with you in any meeting that you want, getting feedback. So the Sidekick gives you nudges, very gentle nudges on visual communication cues from eye gaze. So if you've been talking and you haven't been looking into the lens for a certain amount of time, you would get a nudge. Gestures, posture, framing, facial expressions. Those are some of the cues that we look for in this current version. Audio cues are coming next, things like filler words, intonation, etc. And then we also have a little bit of a game to this kick where the better you do, the more presence points you earn. And you can see how you're kind of accumulating those points as you go through the meeting. And then after each video event that you use the Sidekick on, you get a report card at the end that tells you this was your confidence rating, this was your empathy rating, this was your expression and energy rating, and these were the 3 areas that you need to work on most. So it's kind of a really nicely packaged communication coaching experience that you as a user can activate whenever you want. So integrates into your calendar, can auto launch, or you can use it manually. It doesn't have to always be during a live event.
I love that. And I love the way, obviously now it's first like body language and everything, and then it goes into voice and audio and everything that you said. It really shows how extensive, the application is. And one of the great features that someone like me who love automation, one of the great features that I loved when I was researching virtual Sapiens was the Chrome extension with the Sidekick. And I think I just love the idea of not having to think, to activate my coach. I just know that my coach will kind of tell me, hey, you're about to go on this. Do you want to start, using me now? And I'm like, yes, fine. And then I get the report card at the end. That's fantastic. I think I'm always up for simplicity.
It's so funny, Nelly, that you say that, because we had, before my co-founder came on board, we built like an MVP, and people really liked getting feedback, but it was browser-based still, but you had to go to the website to launch it. And, I was like, my co-founder and I talked about it, and we were like, it has to be seamless. It has to, like, we're not trying to get people to add another step to think about before they're like, no, like, it has to be so easy. So yeah.
Definitely. Otherwise, I will personally be thinking, yeah, I'll do it next time.
Yeah. You're like, yeah. You're right.
So I guess so we're gonna show the clip now and the video. So I'm just gonna get it set up now for you guys to enjoy.
Virtual Sapiens will provide you with a helpful nudge to remind you to use your hands and gestures when you're communicating. And let's say you haven't been looking into the lens. Virtual Sapiens will also provide you with a nudge if it's been too long that you've been speaking and not looking into the lens. We want you to connect directly with your audience. And if everything's going well, Virtual Sapiens will provide you with encouragement so that you know what good feels like. We're all for providing small incremental nudges during real-time events so that you can improve while you're in the field. Virtual Sapiens is really excited to build an entire ecosystem around impactful communication and behavioral patterns that can help you drive impact professionally. The Sidekick is a very small piece of a much bigger whole.
Oh yes, definitely. And we've heard about the big hole, right?
Yeah.
So if anyone is interested, right? People have been watching this and thought, oh my God, yes, I really want to try it out. I know you're doing the first early beta testing.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to either join the testing or get on the list to find out when it gets released, how can I contact you and how can I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way is to just navigate over to our website. It's www.virtualsapiens.co. And we have you just pop your email into our wait list. And yeah, definitely we're just around the corner of being able to launch it more publicly. So getting your email in now will be great in terms of getting you relatively early access.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll make sure to also put the details on our transcripts and also on YouTube so that people can just click on it and go and find out more. And we'll definitely be watching you and see what happens, especially as the product develop and grow, because I already love what you have right now. So I can't wait to see 6 months, a year from now where you will be with that.
Yeah, we're very excited.
So I've got a few more questions. We are coming towards the end of our session together, but I couldn't pass up on the opportunity to ask those few questions that, looking around on the web, I always collect questions from founders, and I'm like, well, we've got someone with experience. Why not just pass it on to Rachel to help us discuss those topics? The first one is about having a strong mindset as a founder. As you know, running your own business, whether it's a tech business or not, there's a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of self-doubts. There's a lot of imposter syndrome. There's a lot of, working long hours and trying to build a life around it. One thing I love about your background is, of course, you come from a performing background, ballet, dancing, being out there. And I'm sure that you've developed, even way before you got to your current company, you've developed a lot of key skills in terms of dealing with mindsets. So what do you think are your 3 top things that you can, advise people, or maybe that you do, to kind of keep a healthy and strong mindset throughout the journey?
Yes. Let's see, my top 3 things. So one of the things that I actually learned, I actually took the structure that I had in the ballet world for granted when I was dancing. And it wasn't until I retired that I realized how crucial to my functioning having structure is. And I think sometimes as a founder, when you're the one who's leading and running everything, it can be very easy to you like float around, and the next thing you know, it's 2 a.m. and you're still working, and then you're trying to wake up at like 8, but then all of a sudden it's 11, and doing whatever you can to just put in place a simple but very easy to follow structure, I think, is one of the most helpful things. It helps you keep on track. It helps you ensure that you're not working longer than you really need to. So that's one thing, structure. And then movement, right? So it is so easy. And I was shocked by how easy it is to just like zone into your computer for hours on end, right? And you're sitting in the same place, you're not moving at all. Your body needs to move. You need to have blood circulating in order for your brain to function properly, right? Like you will be sharper if you take that 5-10 minute break once every 90 minutes, right? At the very least. So movement, structure, and then the other thing I would say is make sure you have a good support network. Okay, so people you can check in with, whether it's other founders, whether it's advisors or mentors, your family, friends. Like, don't be afraid to lean on the people around you, because it's a lonely road.
Yeah. And I love that structure, movement, and support. I completely agree with all three of them. And I love what you said about the movement, because I wear a Fitbit. So sometimes, especially on days when I'm really, really busy, I look at my number of steps and I wonder, how did you manage to do less than 500 steps, during the day? That is awful. That's really bad. So yes, I'm definitely going to be implementing that myself and forcing myself to move, especially now that I've got my office in my own flat. When I go to a co-working space, it's great, you move. But when you're at home, you have your office, everything is all set up. Movement is one of the biggest challenge for me.
Yeah.
So finally, last question I have for you today. It's again more advice on startup founders, right? So one of the things I love about your story was the angle of coming from a completely different background, doing a full career, personal transition, and starting a tech company. What is your main advice that you can give to a startup non-tech founder that is jumping in and really going through the learning curve that you went through yourself?
Yeah, honestly, I would actually say two things. So I think it's important to be consistent in checking in with yourself and taking a look at where you are, taking stock of whether that still aligns with what you want to be doing and where you want to be going, and having the courage to know your limit and know when and if you need to pivot. So one example for myself was, before I really brought Neil on as my co-founder, there was a moment where I really did realize that I definitely couldn't do this alone. And that if for whatever reason it didn't work out with Neil, I would really have to find another partner. But just continuing as a solo founder was not going to be an option for me, right? Having experienced that for a few months, taking stock of how I felt and where I kind of was in that moment, it was very clear that that wasn't sustainable for me. I think sometimes, you're so preoccupied with what you're trying to build and where you want to go that you don't check in with yourself, where you are and whether that's a place that's sustainable for you. So I think that's what I would say or share.
Thanks a lot, Rachel, for sharing very openly. And I think that's a brilliant advice for any startup non-tech founder out there who are wondering whether they should continue or stop, or how to deal with everything that they're going through. Thanks to you again for all of the great tips and advice that you shared throughout. I'm a very big fan of Virtual Sapiens, and I believe that a lot of people watching this episode, whether they are coming from a tech or non-tech background, whether they are established startups or not, will be as inspired by your story as I have been today. Just to finish off, before we go, for anyone out there wondering, how do I find out more about Rachel, find out, she did mention a TED Talk, so I will come back to you later and kind of get the details so that I can put it up as well. So how do people can connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Virtual Sapiens is also up on LinkedIn, and we post regularly. Instagram, I'm Rachel on point with an E at the end. So if you want to follow me there, that's also a good spot. And yeah, most of what I post is happening on those two channels, Twitter as well, but you'll get whatever I post there on LinkedIn and Instagram as well.
Oh, brilliant. So I definitely urge everybody to please follow Rachel. You don't want to miss out for the full launch of Sidekick and anything else from Virtual Sapiens. If you've been enjoying this episode, please make sure that you let the world know about this. We're going to continue to have more startups coming on the show. We have one next week, and we're having a lot more talks on innovation, business models, and a full program ready for you as well. In the meantime, let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.